Honor. May it please the court, the counsel. Wow, how do we even follow that up? We followed it up with truth. First of all, on behalf of myself, my colleagues, most of all Mr. Wilson, thank you for your participation. That's probably not the right word. We're asking you to vote to save Mr. Wilson's life. That's a lot more than just participation. That's probably the worst dilemma you may have to face in your entire life as to whether or not you vote for life or you vote to recommend death for Wade Wilson. The judge started this off with an instruction, and I ask that you refresh that instruction in your mind. As counsel and I try and make our points, we may say things to you that differ from what you heard from the stand. We'll talk about that in more detail as it relates to Dr. Mills and some of the other doctors that testified. Nevertheless, you have to rely on your memory, on your notes, on the collective memory of each and every one of your fellow jurors, because you're going to have to go back there and deliberate, and you're going to have to discuss these things. Let me start with addressing the state's mitigating factors. We already told you the reason that they're factors and not circumstances is because they have to be proven beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. Well, the problem with two of the factors are we have to believe Wade Wilson's statement to law enforcement on October 10th, because that's where the state gets a lot of their facts from. I will tell you that there are two mitigating factors that we agree they've proven beyond every reasonable doubt. One of them is because of the multiple deaths. That's a gimme, that's a freebie. The other is the fact that Mr. Wilson was on probation on or about the time of the event. So those are freebies, we're going to call them, and they're going to be given whatever weight you think that they deserve, which I submit to you isn't much. The other thing I want to point out before we get rolling here is if I say anything during my closing that you think is a criticism of your decision in the first part of this case, it's not. And I want to explain, we've gone into all this mental health mitigation. We're not trying to excuse Mr. Wilson's conduct on October 7th. That's not what this is about. But we are trying to show you what kind of person he was and why he was that kind of person on that date alone, and why he doesn't deserve your recommendation for death. Let's start with cold, calculated, and premeditated. Ms. Melton. Now, the state told you just a minute ago, well, you know, he was partying, he was having a good time, he was doing cocaine. When was he doing cocaine? And do we know that he was actually doing cocaine? Or was he doing what he told you later was maybe it was fentanyl, maybe it was flakka, maybe it was bath salts? He doesn't know, because he's never had a mental health experience from taking controlled substances like he did on October 7th. And when did he actually take those controlled substances? It wasn't before he went out and partied. It was after they went over to Mr. Shepard's house. Because if you recall Mr. Shepard saying, well, I had my own cocaine. Well, if you were using your own cocaine, what did you give Mr. Wilson? Mr. Wilson was okay from 2 to 4 there at Mr. Shepard's house. He and Ms. Melton are doing what adults do on occasion. That's their own private business. Eventually, they had to leave the residence. Now, how is Wade Wilson planning all this? We're going to go to this residence, we're going to leave this, we're going to go to this residence. How is that part of a grand scheme of anything? Well, it's not. It's circumstances happening. So they leave Mr. Shepard's, they would go over to Ms. Melton's with Ms. Johnson. Was that part of the plan for Ms. Johnson to come along? Now, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to wait now till Ms. Johnson leaves before I murder Ms. Melton? No, that wasn't a plan at all. There was no plan. He was freewheeling. He was having sex with this willful participant. He was having a great time. In his statement to law enforcement, he tells them there was no planning. After Ms. Johnson left, all of a sudden something came over him and he strangled Ms. Melton. Now, we're talking about all the pain and suffering and everything else that Ms. Melton felt. We don't know any of that. We know that there are injuries. We know that he suffocated her at asphyxia. I can't even pronounce it. But he choked her to death. He put the big hands around her. He cut off her blood supply through her carotid arteries, and she stopped breathing. I asked their medical examiner, was she even conscious at the time that she died? He goes, I don't know. I can't tell you that. He couldn't tell us that about either of the victims. He wraps her up, and he's going to take her and hide her someplace. But it's getting too light outside. And according to his statement, if you believe his statement, she was too heavy to pick up. She was too heavy for him to pick her up and put her in the trunk? Or was it just getting too light outside? Or what is the truth? We don't know, but the state's trying to tell you that all of this stuff in here is the truth. And it's not. Cold, calculated, and premeditated as it relates to, wait a second here, as it relates to Ms. Ruiz. Well, he went over and he had an altercation with his girlfriend, come back in the car. Then he's just out driving around. He's out driving around and he stops and asks directions. At some point in time, when did he make a decision that she was going to be a victim? She climbs in the car, they drive down the road, and all of a sudden, he snaps again, and he reaches over and chokes her. We don't really know where this occurs because the questions they asked of Mr. Wilson on the 10th aren't very probing. All we know from Mr. Wilson is that she wanted to get out of the car. He reached over and choked her. He drove her someplace. He opened the door, tried to push her out of the vehicle. When she hit the ground, all of a sudden she got up. At one point in time, he says one time. At one point in time, he says 3 or 4 times she was a real fighter. Is any of that true? We don't know. Is it all reflected in other forensic or physical manifestations? Some of it maybe yes, Some of it maybe no. Obviously, if he ran over her 10 or 20 times, that's cold and calculated. That's where she was found. Let me get out of the way so you can see the picture. That's where she was found. Do you see tire tracks in that photograph that would substantiate him running over her 10 or 20 times? The clothing is still on her. Does that substantiate him running over her 10 or 20 times? No. Why? It's a lie. He's embellishing. Why is he doing that? Who knows? He's sick. He's got a diseased mind. We can't relate to that. It's hard for us to know what's going through his head when he's talking to law enforcement. Going back to the drugs. In his statement, it must have been like bath salts or flakka. It just made me lose my effing mind, and it made me effing get crazy. When I'm sober, I'm actually a decent guy, which is what everybody else said. Whatever that dude had me on, like fentanyl, flakka, whatever the F it was, dude, it was not cocaine. I thought it was different, and he gave me a lot of it. That shit had me up for 2.5 days. Once again, that's not an excuse for doing what he did. I just want you to understand what his state of mind was when he was going through these events on October 7th. And that person is not Wade Wilson. And that person does not deserve your recommendation for death. Heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Once again, I'm not going to repeat what I just told you about cold, calculated, and premeditated because it applies to heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Now, even the prosecutor told you that is not the aggravating factor. The aggravating factor is especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Well, he strangled both these women to death, all right? Strangling in and of itself is heinous, atrocious, and cruel, according to the state. So it would be much better if he walked up and put a bullet in the back of her head because she didn't see it coming, or stabbed her to death from behind because she didn't see it coming. Not all homicides are especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel. And when your medical examiner gets up there and he says, I can't tell you if she was conscious when she died. Well, if she wasn't conscious, then she wasn't experiencing the pain and the panic that the state wants you to believe. Now, we subjected you folks to 3 gentlemen who have degrees that presumably we don't have, who got up on the stand yesterday and talked about mental health. There are other mitigators. The state went through the mitigators. Some of them have been proven to you. I'm not going to go through all those mitigators. I will tell you that the initial mitigators, and this isn't the whole list. You may have the rest of the list on your legal pads there. You may have taken something down about Wade Wilson that's important to you, that's important for you to consider as to whether or not you're going to recommend that he die. But this is a partial list. And part of the partial list is when Wade Wilson is not on drugs, He is charming, he's polite, he's cool, he's in a good mood, he's friendly, and he's outgoing. Well, who was that on October 7th? That wasn't Wade Wilson. Not according to the people that know Wade Wilson. This isn't his family. This is the people that were with him. This is the people that know him. That's how they described him. Wade Wilson confessed to law enforcement to do the right thing. Wade Wilson wanted to put Ms. Ruiz back with her family so they could bury the body. That's what he told law enforcement. Well, the state wants you to believe his recitation of what happened is factual, but that isn't. So, what do you believe out of Wade Wilson's statement, and what don't you believe? You got to be hard-pressed to want to vote for death when you don't even know what the truth is. Our doctors, they all have different qualifications. The state first addressed Dr. Mills and basically brushed his testimony under the rug. Dr. Mills has been a psychiatrist for almost 50 years. Dr. Mills was the director of the largest mental health facility in North America with thousands of employees, hundreds or thousands of doctors working under him. That deserves your respect. Now, he would like to have had a lot more evidence, a lot more contact with Wade Wilson, but that was not to be. So, I threw him up on the stand and kind of hung him out to dry. Well, you didn't have a lot of time with him, no. But the time he had with him, he figured Wade Wilson out. What else did he use? He used the documents, presumably the same documents that Dr. Herkov looked at, and he came up with diagnoses in those documents. Now, we didn't have a lot of the documents that we'd like to have had. You heard there's a fire at his parents' home, and all those documents from when he was younger are gone. What we had is what we had. But what was interesting was the last thing you heard yesterday. After Dr. Eisenstein had told you, when he reviewed the records, there were many examples of medication that were provided to Wade Wilson as recently as 2022 or 2023. And then Dr. Mills got up there and told you what they're for. They're not this sissy stuff that Dr. Herkov testified to. They're the real thing. They're antipsychotic drugs. They're there to help treat the psychotic disorders that are listed amongst our mitigators. You can't just ignore that. Now, I think half of Dr. Herkov's testimony was all about him. What did he do? Well, he looked at some of the state's evidence. He looked at some videos of Wade Wilson when he gave a statement and Wade Wilson when he was in the vehicle. And he didn't see that Wade Wilson exhibited those disorders while he viewed it, those two relatively short videos. But he went through the records. Like I said before, presumably the same records everybody else had the opportunity to look at. And he didn't find any examples of either medication or diagnosis. Dr. Mills did. Dr. Eisenstein did. But in all fairness to Dr. Herkov, he didn't have the documents very long, and I submit to you, he just missed it. He said he went through them in an hour or two. I don't know how you go through a stack of papers in an hour or two and expect to find anything, but that's what he told us. So we're going to let him off the hook. Dr. Eisenstein, but he was very helpful on two things. Dr. Eisenstein spent the most time with Wade Wilson. Dr. Eisenstein put Wade Wilson through several tests. Let's see. What Dr. Eisenstein, Dr. Herkov did was take the tests that Dr. Eisenstein performed, take the raw data, and he made little charts that we got to look at yesterday. And I agree. On certain things, Wade Wilson is normal. He even was the top of normal, of average, in a couple of things. But there were some of the tests where we talked about memory. Tests that would have been important to know those results before we take his statement for granted. Auditory memory number 1, auditory memory number 2, perceptual reasoning, visual memory 1, visual memory 2. All 5 of those tests, he was anywhere from the bottom 5 to the bottom 2%. Only 4 people or 1 person was worse than he was. Executive functioning. Well, on 3 of those, he was fine. He was fine. 4 of those, I'm sorry, I don't want to mischaracterize. On 4 of them, he was fine. He was anywhere from 25% to 50%. He's still in the bottom half. But on the WCST-PR test, he was in the bottom 1%. It doesn't get any lower than that. As a matter of fact, it was probably below that because Dr. Eisenstein told you it was 7 deviations below average. And it was almost negligible as far as trying to calculate his result. And the Dellis-Kaplan executive functioning, he did real well on most of them. But on VF category and VF switching, he was either the bottom 5% or the bottom 3%. There's something wrong with his brain. It doesn't work like everybody else's does. Do we know exactly what's wrong? No. Why? Because we only have some CAT scans that don't tell us very much. It tells us if we have a cracked skull. It tells us if there's bleeding under the skull. Well, what do we need? We need PET scans. We need MRIs. Do we have any of those? No, we don't. So you want me to sit here and tell you exactly what's wrong with Wade Wilson? I can't do it. But there's something terribly wrong with him. Now, drugs. Well, you know, just because you're a drug addict, we're not going to not consider the death penalty just because you're a drug addict. It's not that he's a drug addict. He took drugs. He started taking drugs at 13. What drugs he's taken over his lifetime, we're not sure. What's the frequency that he's taken the drugs over his lifetime? We're not sure of that either. All we're sure of is that night he was given drugs. What drugs, we don't know. But one of the gems from Dr. Herkov yesterday, as an example, if you have a disorder, and you feed that disorder, just say, cocaine, what does that do? That amplifies the problem. Well, what if it's another drug? What if it's one of these synthetic drugs that Wade Wilson complained of? What does that do to Wade Wilson when he has a mental health issue? Well, he took it himself. I know he took it himself. You're not rewarding him. You're just trying to decide if you want to take that guy who's cool, who's polite, who's charming, who's friendly, who, in his own words, fucks up one night and does that. I'm going to go back, and I apologize for going in reverse on something here. But, you know, one of the troubling things in the allegations is the fact that he ran over her. We've already discussed the fact that we can't see all these tire marks and stuff from where he ran over her all these times. But we do have law enforcement agency. And they are at work, and what did they do? They seized the black vehicle that he was riding around in. And what did they do? They took a swab inside and found blood that belonged to Ms. Ruiz. But what else did they do? They swabbed the front of the vehicle. Okay? And we heard testimony about what they got from... Oh, no, we didn't. We didn't hear any testimony, did we? Why? Because law enforcement agency didn't bother to send that swab off. Didn't bother to get it tested. A piece of evidence that you could have had, that you didn't have, that would have supported the state's contention that Mr. Wilson is telling the truth on October 10th. And you don't have it. I'm not going to bore you with a lot more argument here. You people have a hard enough time in front of you. But there's just a couple of things I want to stress. I mean, somebody in their right mind, kills a woman and leaves her in her home because it's getting too light outside. So then he goes to see his girlfriend. And he attacks his girlfriend in broad daylight in front of a bunch of witnesses. Then he leaves. And it's still broad daylight, and he goes riding down a road and picks up Miss Ruiz and later kills her. Does that make any sense? You know what else doesn't make any sense? That's Wade Wilson in October. That's Wade Wilson now. Who in their right mind does that to themselves? He's not in his right mind all the time. And it's worse when you throw drugs on top of it. When he was a little boy, what did he do? They found him wearing a long sleeve shirt with the shirt stapled to his arms. This isn't something that just occurred overnight. This is something that's been growing in Wade Wilson for a long, long time. Now, we heard from relatives of both Ms. Melton and Ms. Ruiz, and I'm sure that there were more that may have wanted to come up, and they wanted to tell you about their loss. We can't fix their loss. They have a hole in their heart. And the only way you can fix that hole in their heart is with love and friendship and fellowship and companionship, and hope that it shrinks the hole in their heart. But you can't fill the holes in their heart with another body. We can't bring these ladies back. There's nothing that you can do to fix that problem. But you can do the right thing here today. I want to, let me see here. Too many papers. Bear with me a second. We have an exhibit. That exhibit's in evidence. And I'm certainly not going to read the whole thing. You've been very attentive and very patient with me, and I appreciate that. For many years, we held on to the hope that nurture would overcome genetics. He was a wonderful kid, kind to animals, kind to those smaller than himself, and loving to his family. But there are many things in life that are out of our control, and it wasn't enough. Wade, like his birth mother, became a victim of his diseased mind. Know that he did not choose this, not any of it. He fought hard against the genetic pull of mental illness and drug abuse. But the man before you is fallible, and he is human, and he lost that fight. As his family, we knew the happy and loving child that he was. The boy who wanted to spend time with his parents and sisters. The one who played sports and loved to read. That person would never do the things he has done. That boy is still in there somewhere, but is now overtaken by the monster of disease and addiction. There's a concept, it's not a concept, it's a gift, that each one of us has the potential. It's something that makes us different from everything else in the animal world. It's a concept known as mercy. When you were selected to sit on this jury, we talked about the jury instructions and those types of things. And the primary theme here is you do not have to vote for death. There's nothing to suggest that you have to vote for death. If the aggravators outweigh the mitigating circumstances, you still don't have to vote for death. But Mr. Shirley, he didn't show either one of those women mercy on October 7th. That's because the monster that he was on October 7th was incapable of mercy. You are not that monster. You are capable of it, and you need to exercise it on those few occasions you have in life when you have the power to do so. We can't love him less because madness has taken him from us. Lock away the monster, but show mercy to the boy inside who didn't choose this path. Know that boy is still in there somewhere, and he is still loved. Lock away the monster.